Hello everyone, this is Vivek Raja and we have Narmada here. Welcome
Hello
to
everyone.
Oktoberfest. Welcome you all to today's event, which is Hacktoberfest Intro to Open Source 2021. Uh, I guess Narmada, you can take it from here. Narmada, your mic is muted.
Hello everyone. Good morning all. And today we are having a session on Hacktoberfest. And first of all, this is a session for anyone who is wanting to start contributing to open source and who has no path yet. What is the path to open source contributing? How I should take the few steps to reach the goal of performing an Hacktober contribution to open source and also be an independent open source contributor for other tech communities. So we are, today we'll be having a sessions on what is Hacktoberfest, what are the process behind it, how we do contributions using Hacktoberfest, and at the same times we have. Also gonna go deep into what are the open source projects available, what are the communities that are there which helps in open source contributions, and also share few experience done by previous years or prior years contributors, how it has helped them grow, how it has helped them in achieving learning, at the same times helping others start their open source journey. So today we have Vivek as our guest speaker, who will be taking the sessions on the open source projects and also sharing few of the experience we had here with our projects, and also help anyone. What is the path that someone needs to take when deciding that they want to build a career or to build a work experience or learn something using open source. Over to you, Vivek.
Yep. Thanks for amazing intro, Narmada. And hello, everyone. I am Vivek Raja, and today, actually, we'll be talking about what's open source, where we can find, and I'm going to be answering a lot of common questions which you will be having in your mind before getting starting with open source. So I'll be actually bursting some of the myths and misconceptions which is lying around with open source contributions and stuff. So let's get started with that. First of all, let me share my screen. Give me some time. Okay, I guess you can see my screen right now. So I'm Vivek Raj. I'm working as a data scientist at a startup called Cortex BCI and Nextem, and I'm actually from Tamil Nadu. So I have been a speaker and a host of Oktoberfest events right from 2019. When I was in college, we had a club where we hosted Hacktoberfest for my college. And when I was in 2020, when I graduated, we hosted an event for as a collaboration of several communities in Tamil Nadu. And today we have I'm associating myself with Azure Developer Community, and they're going nationwide. So I'm also an organizer at Azure Developer Community. I handle a couple of cities in Tamil Nadu, which is Madurai, Coimbatore, and Chennai. And besides that, I'm also an AWS community builder in machine learning topic. I've done around 16 cloud certifications overall for past 2 years. So I'm Microsoft Azure data scientist, AI engineer, data engineer, and developer associate. I'm planning to give my other exams quite soon, so hopefully it goes well. And besides all my this one during my college days itself, I started attending a lot of hackathons. So I participated around 60 to 65 hackathons and won around 20 international and national level hackathons. So I was a participant way back then when I was in college, and nowadays I take up the role of a mentoring teams, or even presiding as a technical judge over hackathons and everything. So it's quite fun to be in hackathon ecosystem for a very long time. I'm also a little bit in research side as well. So I have published around 5 to 6 research papers. mostly in AI, and I have one patent which I filed for, and it's under evaluation, so likely to be published very soon. And I'm also an active speaker, mentor, and blogger. So if you could really find me in several developer communities such as Azure Developer Community, AWS, and other TensorFlow, and so on. So I used to speak in and around several communities and conferences. And besides, in the communities, I do act as a mentor and give my expertise over in AI and machine learning. And in my free time, I love to write blogs. So most of my blogs have revolved around several use cases, which you can't really find in documentation. So it's more like how to do and why to do and so on and so stuff. And I've also been an open source contributor for a lot of time. So if you can check out my GitHub repo, which has around 80 plus repositories. So some of which I have started while I was participating in hackathons, and some are the ones which I have started for very recently as well. So let's talk about my GitHub stuff a little bit later, but let's jump into the session right now. So what we'll be actually doing is like, what is actually open source? We will try to understand the basic idea of what open source is, and how a person is associating himself with open source and everything. Then we will also see the steps how you can launch your own open source project. So an open source does not necessarily mean you have to be a contributing member, but instead you can also be an owner of an open source project. So suppose if you have that in your mind, an idea, how do you actually have to do it, and what are the procedures and things you have to keep in mind for that. Next, we will also talk about how to collaborate in open sources. So it's like there are several ways you can contribute in open source, and we will see about that. And also after that, I'll do share my experience of participating in Hacktoberfest for past 2 years and this year as well, and my experience with open sourcing several projects of mine, and how hackathons and communities have been helping me so far to contribute to open source. And in the end, we can take some quick questions as well. So if you do have any questions, please drop it in the chat box. We will take it at the end of the session. So first things first, let's jump right into the topic, which is what is open source. So an open source is like a source code which is publicly available. Uh, you may ask a question like Windows or something which someone is deeply innovatively working on. Why would really someone open source a project, and what's the necessity behind it? We always feel insecure, or even we are scared that our idea might be a thefted one, or someone will steal an idea, make it a better one, and release it in market. But if these are conditions in place, but why do you really have to make your source code publicly available? So that's the whole point of open source. So when you open source a particular project, which means you enable transparency, and you invite other collaborators and people to look into your project, help them with you, and finally you can distribute your own project for any purposes. So the main motto of having an open source is to make the community get involved. It's free to use, you can study, and you have all the permissions to modify and redistribute the project for any purposes. But since you are the one who have initiated that kind of an open source project, there is a thumb rule, and there is an always an credit which lies with the open source team. So that's all we are here for, which is for the knowledge and everything. And it enables adoption and collaboration. So what we mean by adoption is like, for example, if you're working in a particular program for a long time, you're just working in a project or program, but you still can't find the bugs which you want to really clear about, but you really don't know where the bug is coming from. And suddenly you ask one of your friends to come and look into your project and say like, see, I have some trouble, can you just look into my code and see where I'm exactly getting this error? So since your friend is like is a person who knows programming, but he has some fresh set of eyes to look into the code, he might understand the code a little bit better, and he might also find to able to fix that issue. So imagine your simple program script as your open source project, and your friend as a community. So you have a lot of community members who are willing to contribute to projects which is of definite purposes and stuff, and you will be able to resolve issues, make your project better, and you enable everyone to contribute to a project, and that uh, at the end will be as an open source project, and people will be actually using those millions of lines of code. For example, the putties which you use to connect to SSH or TCP or FTP is itself is an open source project. So these are several one of the several projects which is open source. We will also see what are the like very famous open source projects and everything. And now comes a question like, why do I really need to open source? So we have discussed about how the collaboration helps you in accept changes and fix issues that and make your fast track your project and so on. So instead of having a closed set of members working on a project, you can always adopt to uh, uh, open source, which enables the world of experts, developers, and contributors to look into your code and contribute to it and everything. For example, like one of the programming exercise platform has around 350 contributors, which is excessism. And the other reason is adoption. Like it can be used by anyone for any purposes. And for example, WordPress is you might all used WordPress as a form that itself was started from an open source project called B2. So they have forked that particular B2 repository, and they made the necessary changes, and they published that as their own company, which is the WordPress. So that which is very quite prominent, and we use it on daily basis as well. And transparency. So since almost all nation governments are very very concerned about data and transparency, so open sourcing and project will actually enable the transparency and will show you like what are the how your data is handled and everything. So which means it adds a credit that your software is actually ethical and very good to use. So, what do I really get from contributing to open source? That's one of the question which I hear from a lot of people. So it's like, for example, this is one of a passion for developers. So it's like when you contribute to open source, you get the satisfaction of learning, teaching, and collaborating with a lot of developers, which you are not even would have had a chance if this is not available. It's like you can network with developers all around the world, and you can improve the software. Which for example, you're just using a software and you find a lot of bugs and you find it a little bit annoying to use it. Instead of you can help that software grow by reporting that bugs, so which is one thing. Or if you are a good developer, you can also go ahead and fix the bug, and this is all possible only when the software is open sourced. And you can improve your programming skills and your tech stack drastically. So it's one of the way to do it. And you can meet people and network with them. You can find mentors, and you can teach others as well. So you can become your own mentor. So that's how you collaborate with a lot of people. And this open source contribution actually plays a vital role in your career as well. So if you're a student and you are actually contributing to open source, which in it actually shows your interest to open source and passion to development, software development, and programming. And also one cannot just go ahead and fix an issue just like that. So that means a person has to demonstrate a good number of programming experience for it. That's how an issue will be actually resolved and accepted by the maintainers. So if you actually get a contributor status in any of the repo, that signifies and validates your programming experience and everything. So that's what recruiters look for, and that has a very good impact as well. And you can learn some people skills, which I mean is like you get to interact, you know how to uh, move things or highlight an issue, take a conversation ahead, or plan and organize event, or do something. That's how open source work. It's like a local community coming together to for some cause, same like that. So now that we have discussed about, we have actually talked a lot about what is open source and how much benefits that brings you if you contribute to open source and everything. But how does an open source project actually look like, and what does an open source project consist of, and who can do the open source project, and who can contribute, who can maintain it, and what should an open source project should contain that gives the status of an open source project, and so on. So these are the things which you should look for, or you can take up a role for this. So an open source project has these kind of people always. So it's like an author. So the author represents a particular person or an organization. For example, if you're yourself writing a Python package and you're open sourcing your Python package for some benefits, so you're the author, or you might represent a company or organization who has created the project. For example, like uh,
Sorry to interrupt you, Vivek.
yep.
I am seeing a blank on your screen. Your screen share has been stopped.
Let me check that.
Oh, okay, it's back online.
Can you see now?
No, now I can't see. I think many of participants texted that they are unable to see the screen.
Okay, let me remove my screen and share it again. Were you guys not able to see from the beginning, or should I just go back and how about now? Can you see something?
Yeah, we are able to see the session. Thank you.
Oh,
You
okay.
can
Sorry.
continue.
Sorry for that technical glitch, but I will just walk you through whatever we have seen so far. So it's like what we had for open source, and what's the agenda of today's talk, and we have seen about why open source and how that open source really contribute to a particular project, and how does it really make an open source, and how does contributing in open source actually helps you out. And now we were talking about how anatomy of an open source project looks like. So it's like we have uh, something called a particular open source project has a set of people, so which we were talking about. So an author represents the person or the organization that that who have initiated the project. For example, if you're creating a node package and you're publishing and you're open sourcing it, that itself makes you an author. So there is something on an owner. So probably like it does not necessarily mean the owner of the project must be the author. So the owner is the one who takes the responsibility of uh, whatever happens within that open source project. It's like who has all the administrative ownership of that repository or that particular organization. So it usually used to be like the author itself can take the ownership, but it's not. The owner can be several people who can do that. And there are something on maintenance who actually contribute uh, for maintaining the particular open source project to make sure that it goes on track and it has a vision which they have kept for the project as well. So uh, in the maintenance can be has a subset of both authors and owners as well. So it can be and they can add more number of maintenance as well. So they have that organizational aspects to it. So they take that responsibility of whether to commit that particular pull request or fix that issue and so on. So and make sure that the community is engaged and properly maintained. And contributors are the ones who actually contribute to something back to the project. For example, if you fix an issue, that means you are a contributor to that particular project. And when it comes to community members, it's like the persons who actually use that particular project. Those are called members. So they may not be actual the ones who contribute to the project by fixing issues or doing something, but rather they'll be actually helping the functionality of the project. For example, they can report the performance issues and so on. So they can express their opinions and feedback, or they can request for new features which they feel that this project might should have, and so on. So these are the community members which uh, you can look out for. And as we are talking about the anatomy of open source project, we saw about different persons in that particular open source project and how they really help us to contribute to it. And also like now let's talk about what an actual open source project should have that makes itself as an open source project. So these are some of the requirements that the project should have, which is the license. So every open source project should have a license. So if it does not have a license, it does not mean it's an open source. The license can be an MIT license and so on. So you can decide on how do you want to allow users to use that or distribute. So uh, those kind of licenses give you the power of making a project an open source. And secondly, a README file. So a README file should gives a sort of a welcome note and an instruction manual about what this project really does, and how that project is useful to the community, and how people can get started with the project as well. It can be an installation guide and so on. So and contributing is where a set of readmes where enables or gives instructions to the people how to contribute to this particular project and what are the steps they need to make sure to make a valid pull request. So these are the readmes which you have to look into when you are contributing to a particular project, which actually helps you in this Hacktoberfest, because you have to make 4 valid pull requests. So make sure that you read the contributing README files to make sure you are in a good position to contribute as well. And code of conduct is where it says some ground rules for the participants. It's like how to interact with your fellow contributors or your members, or how to you should approach your maintainers or owners of this particular repo for any kind of an issue or feedback or anything else. So that completely comes under the code of conduct, and it usually arrives, the rules are written by the owners itself. So everything, though they have a common set of rules, there are few things which they have peculiarly written which you might also look into if you're part of that project. There may be other documentations as well. So since an open source project might not be a simple one which requires you to do that, so it might be chunks and chunks of hundreds of modules which is operating inside that particular project. So which means there might be additional documentations and tutorials that you might really go through in order to contribute in a better way. And there are things which has some policies associated with that. For example, data privacy policies and so on. So which you have to comply for that policies to make sure that you don't violate any kind of rules before you contribute to it. Yep. So now that we understood like who are the people who contribute to open source and how an open source project actually looks like. So now that we have seen both of that, now let's see how you can contribute to the particular open source project. So it's like we have an issue tracker, which is where all the bugs have been reported, and that's where you can find a new issue to take up and work for it. And pull request is where people discuss on the review changes that are in progress. For example, if you have fixed particular issue and you're conveying that okay, I have fixed this issue. If you feel this whatever I've written the code is going to be a valid one, and it can be integrated without any violating the existing code base, that is approved by the maintainers or the other contributors. So once that is approved, so your pull request approved, then it merged into your the main project itself. And an open source project usually have some mailing list and forums to help people uh, to know about something which communicates with the contributors and maintainers. And there is a chat channel, for example, to network with the people to get to know about them, and also understand how the project works. And if you're going to need some help in understanding of particular kind of an architecture or how that works, you can really help reach out to the people who worked on that, and that will really help you out in fixing the issues. So that's how an anatomy of an open source project looks like. So now that we have seen, like we have spoke a lot about what is open source, and why is open source, and what makes an open source, and how you can contribute to an open source project. It's like what should you look for before contributing to it, and what's an open source project looks like what are the roles in people's, and what are the files and licenses which it has, and everything. So now that we know enough knowledge about how an open source actually operates. This is where you can come into picture and you can launch your own open source projects. For example, let's see how you can do that. So before we go into that, let me check the chat if you have any questions so I can take it as well. So if you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat box. I can take it at the end of the session as well. So uh, let me, I'm sorry for that. Let me share my screen again and yep. So let's get back to the topic where we were discussing about how you can launch your own open source project. So it will be like more like a do's and don'ts because we already know what an open source project has like. So your open source project should be something which contributes to people and it has a better outcome for that. So it's like more like an kind of I would always associate an open source work as a startup because you run along with a lot of people, you develop some product from scratch, and it actually pays off something at the end. So pays off, which means like it helps a lot of people who use that particular project. So it's like any other creative activity which requires you to have patience, perseverance, hard work, and to maintain and to get that project keep going on. So that's one way. And second thing is like it's not about showing off your work, but it's actually more about how you want to uh, welcome others in contributing to your project. So that's an ultimate goal. So it's not about you worked on some project and you want to show off the world, okay, I've done something, take a look at it. No, it's not going to work that way, but it's like, okay, I've done something, but I do really have some issues or concerns that will make this project even more better if you can contribute to that. So that's the whole tone of any open source project which comes into picture. And so if you really want to welcome your contributors, so which means you have to spend some time in writing a clear documentation so that any person who wants to come into and contribute can get started immediately. So let's assume like you have open sourced a particular project and you started it, and a couple of members are working on your project, and your community is going as in this open source project. So what do you have to do? So which means you have to take the responsibility of responding to the issues, reviewing the code, and also if this project has a better outcome or a software which will make things easier. So which means you can also evangelize this project so that people will get to know about your project to use that as well. So that's how you can actually help your project to grow much more better. So uh, as we can see, like the an open source project is not about just about coding. It involves a lot of other stuff as well, which means you have to maintain it, you have to network with people, you have to also document it, and so on. So that's why I always relate an open source project to startup. It's not about just creating a product, but it involves a lot of business and people skills involved around it as well. So that's how with the time which is actually spent on non-coding tasks will depend on the size and scope of the project, which means you have to you should be prepared as a maintainer to address yourself, or you have to invite a lot of maintainers to make sure that it's documented and you help others to review the code and everything. And also like if you're actually an organization which is actually open sourcing a project and you're owner of that particular thing, you have to make sure that the project has enough resources for it to work upon, or else you have to identify like who's maintaining it and how you have to share those tasks with the community and so on. So that's right lies totally with the owner of that particular repo. So as we were talking about what makes an open source. So if you are actually going to open source a project, make sure that you have this checklist with you. So which is the license which we are talking about. So which actually grants the title of an open source project for it, and the README file for welcoming your all your community, your contributors and maintainers. And what about your contributing guidelines is how you establish the guidelines for contributors to do that. And code of conduct is where you establish some ground rules to interact with other fellow members as well. And of course your project should have a naming and branding. So once a project kicks off and it has some a good resource and as well as something which you can contribute to your project, so it's that means you can make sure you can evangelize the project in a better way. So now that actually we have spoken a lot about how to launch your own open source project. So I myself has a two project which is currently open source, currently working upon, which is of literature love. So it's an open source project where you can listen, enjoy literature, text, poems, and everything, but in your own language which you prefer. It's like, for example, all the world literatures are confined to one language, and translating it, the texts are pretty very hectic ones. So what if there is a project or a website which will automatically translates the world literature which you want to read in your own preferred language, and it also generates an audiobook for that. So sounds cool, right? So that was what we had I had created in Azure Cognitive Services, and we have hosted it in Azure, and it's still working. So we can always take a look at that as well. So I think I can, yep. So this open source project also won one of the best Azure developer stories, which we had submitted the blog as well. So uh, the one thing which is actually good about this project is like the contributors who have actually contributed to this project is not only based on coding. So it's like I'm not actually an expert who is good at French. So but we had a French developer who contributed to this one, so they'll be able to do that. um, can you just hold on a second? I'll be back in.
Yes. Guys, you can have post your questions on the chat window. If any of you need any queries that you have, any help you need on open source contributing or regarding Hacktoberfest or anything that we as a Azure Dev community which can help you in your journey on or a path on open source contribution, kindly post it on the chat window.
Sorry for that little disturbance. So it's like when we were actually the one who has created this project was me, but I really didn't contribute, give up this all the literature text. So I actually worked on only one text called Tirukural, but the other texts which were actually contributed was from the other members who were actually interested in literatures and they want to read literature in other people. So like these are two epics in Tamil, if you're familiar about, and this one is from a French poem which is by Victor Hugo, which is very famous. And this is one of the short stories by the person who himself is an author. So these are the stuff which like we invite people to contribute and how we can work and everything. So it's open source is available in GitHub and you can contribute to it for that. So there is another project called Python package, which I'm going to open source a little very soon. So have a look at that, and also it can relate to my previous sessions where we actually discussed about how to host a particular Python package in Azure DevOps. So that though it dealt about how to host it, but it in fact covers the open source aspects of everything as well. So now let's concentrate on how to contribute to open source projects. It's like that will help you to even help you uh, with your Hacktoberfest. So first thing is like you have to your goal is to learn how to collaborate with others. So you have to network with people and you have to get a core understanding of how that project works, and and you have to question yourself. It's like what really makes you want to contribute to the project. It's always more than just fixing typos or updating the documentation. It can be simple as that, but it not necessarily be, because you have to do something which has some a good value to what you do as well. So if you don't know about how to get started as a contributor, you can do surely check out this guide of how to contribute to open source. So this is how it works. So if you want to really put open source contribution into few couple of lines, I will always say this one. So it's like from program. If you're familiar with Python, you might understand it, but I will get through it. So this is what I've written. It's like, from programming languages, import the language, and from the projects, import your favorite language project. So it's like, you have to work on a particular language which you're familiar with and you're good at it as well. And once you've selected your language, you can select the projects which are available to that particular languages, and you can work on that particular favorite project of yours. So once, after that, you have to find your issues, and once you find the issues, resolve the bug. So where you can find the issues, go and check the issue tracker. And once you resolve the bug, what you have to do is just make sure that you follow the contributing guidelines, and commit your PR. And once the PR is committed, your maintainers and the reviewers will take a look at it, and make sure that it passed all the contributing guidelines. And once that is done, your code will be accepted or rejected based on how it goes. Or if it is accepted, that will be actually available open source to everyone. So that's how you have to get started with any open sourcing project. And now comes the question, like, is coding the only way to contribute to open source? The answer is no. Coding is not the only way. There are several other ways you can contribute to open source. As we saw earlier, like in one of my open source projects, where people contribute in the literature text, who are actually not developers, but they were actually who are people who are interested in reading literature text. Or one of the person was actually a professor in French, actually, so he wants to read his French article in English. So that's how he contributed. So it's like, coding is not necessarily the only way to contribute to open source, and you don't really have to be a developer to contribute. You can be anyone who can contribute to open source. So what's the other ways to contribute other than coding? You can become a project maintainer. So it's like, you can review the code decisions, the pull requests which are coming in. You can maintain if the people are following the guidelines, who are working in that particular project and everything. You can work on the documentation, as like what is done and what's yet to be done. So what this project is actually has and everything. So documentation is quite a hectic process, but if you would like to write something technically, you can really start working on documentation. And plan and organize events is where you collaborate with your other community members to give them real insights about the project. So you can give some virtual meetings, or have some chill out parties, like just for the contributors, to make sure that they feel included in your project as well. Or you can also have some events which addresses some of the main aspects of your particular repos, or any organization decision which happens, and you have to convey that down to your members as well. So you can also design your particular if you're working on naming and branding of that particular project, you can work on the design aspects. It's about how to help them to create a better UI or something like that. Or you can write, if you don't want to involve in those aspects, you can create some testing tools which will actually facilitate your contributors to contribute in a much better way. And there are people, you can help people around. You can become your own mentor, and you can become a mentor of the project, and you can help people to understand the project much more better. And does the open source project necessarily be a software project? The answer is no. It can be not only a software project, it can be a list of compilation of best things. For example, there is a wide range of GitHub repositories which is actually about interview questions, compilations, or a repository of awesome compilations for UI related themes and everything. So these are the ways you can actually contribute. So if you find an interesting UI theme which you want to make sure that people can also use it, you can also mention that as one of the awesome compilation repos as well. And now that actually we know, like what is an open source project, how to launch it, how you can contribute, and what are the ways to contribute, and how you can be play a vital role in that contribution. So now that we know everything, now comes the very crucial question: where should I contribute? Right? The first thing is about finding your project. You know your language, so finding the project is the one. So that's what we are going to look for. It's like, this will actually help you out in Hacktoberfest as well, how to look out for open source project and where you can contribute it. So every most of the organizations, like almost every organization, has their own open source projects For example, Mozilla has their own open source, Google, Azure, AWS, Microsoft, Wikipedia, Python, everything has. Even Wikipedia has a lot of open source bugs and everything. So these are the links you can immediately go ahead and get started. Let's just look at one of those open source. It's like uh, there is several open source projects, and what are the projects you can look into. You can have that. So it's like if you want to work on GPRC, or if you work on OpenTitan, or something like if you want to work on TensorFlows or some, you can always look into that aspects. So these are the stuff which is actually, you can work on the Firebase and everything. So you can also work on the featured projects, and you can find the necessity stuff. So what is my experience of working with open source? So what I have done is I've been a mentor. So for currently there is no Google Code, and it was closed after 10 years anniversary. So uh, uh, fortunately and unfortunately, I was a person in the last batch of Google Code. So I was a mentor to around kids around the world of around age uh, 11 to 17 who are actually interested in contributing to open source. So I was a mentor then, helping them out how to contribute and everything. So I was a part of the mentor in Google Code in 2019. And I'm also currently mentor at various open source communities like TensorFlow user group. Even Azure developer community has its own open source as well. So if you can check out our organizers repos, we have launched a couple of open source, which literally itself is an open source as well. So I'm also part of Linux user group, School of AI, Google developer group in Madurai, and several others, and AWS user groups. So everyone has their own set of open source projects and everything. And also I have presented a lot of open source project at several instances, which actually includes hackathon. So I was part of the open source project which is done at Google Explore ML 2020. I was one of the co-facilitators, as well as I went for Google Bill for Digital India, which is a collaboration between Google and government of India on building some one of the like innovative projects that will solve real-time problems. So these projects are actually now open source and available for people to contribute as well. And as I've said, I have worked a lot on my hackathons from my college days. So most of my projects are open source, and which owners are currently the organization which I contributed to. So these are how you can actually contribute to as well. So which includes Smart India Hackathon, DHFL, CII Technological Quest. CII is actually Confederation of Indian Industries. So there is a lot of organizations which is actually looking out for developers who can contribute to their projects. So all you have to do is go and take a look at that. And also I have said, like, I have around a lot of open source projects in my GitHub, so you can go ahead and check out Vivek 0712. I have around 80 plus repositories, a few of which are open sourced, and you can take a look at that and contribute to that as well. So now that we spoke about a way to contribute, and we have seen a few of the events and the organizations who have that, but let's now discuss about the programs and the events which takes place along with open source. So there are very prominent open source programs which goes on, like Season of Docs, Season of KDE. KDE is like, we have also seen that, Mozilla Winter of Security. OWASP is one of the famous and very prevalent one, and Google Summer of Code is also very prominent way of contributing to open source. So there are others like we have Google Summer of Earth Engine, Alibaba Summer of Code, Linux kernel, and everything. So you can find a program and look out for this application, apply to it. Once you get selected, you can start contributing to the open source. And also we have some of competitions which is associated with open source. So Hacktoberfest itself is a competition which is like gives you the privilege of getting some doing some pull requests, which actually help makes you to do some open source. So there are a couple of competitions which revolves around open source. It's like Hacktoberfest, we have boss, and so on, so, and girl script summer of code as well. So these are the links, you can go ahead and look into it. And you can have these decks will be presented a little bit later. So we can have a look at every single code aspect a little bit later. So I'm up for questions. So if anyone has any questions, that would be great. You can put that in
Yes,
chat.
Vivek, we have few questions in participants. What are the open source project I can contribute to? So,
Right.
yeah.
Yep. So we have what are the open source projects? Okay. So since there is several ways you can do that. So it's about first finding your favorite programming language or the tech stack which you are actually familiar with, and then go ahead and find the project which are associated with that particular project. So for that programming language. So that's one of the ways you can find it. But the other ways is like you can check out the organization if you're willing to contribute to the particular organization. You can directly go there, filter out by organization, and then work on that. Or else you can just go ahead, find some interesting cool repos in GitHub, and you can find working on that. So these are the several ways you can actually contribute. And I have also given you the list of the open source programs and the ways organizations where you can find the relevant stuff. So you can take a look at that as well. Okay. I
So
guess I
we
have.
have one more question from Ranjan. He is asking, do we have projects which specify the tech stack that needs to be used in those projects?
Yep, that's how actually open source work. It's like, for example, if a particular project has Python as its programming language, and you have programming language as Python or tech stack, for example, you work on something of Node and JavaScript, so you can find the similar projects which are available on that particular aspect. So that's always available, and you can just go out and filter it in. For example, if you go to GitHub and filter it by programming languages, you can find a tons of repos there. Or you can go to a particular organization. For example, as I was talking about Google's open source, where we had actually filtered it out by the tech stack and the domain. So if you can go ahead and explore a few of the stuff, you'll be actually able to find some of the projects which you can look into.
Okay. Are we able to share those links which you have been shown in the slides for the participants? Is there any
Yep.
way they can get?
Um, yep. What I can do is I can share my GitHub repo, which I'll be actually uploading my presentation text. So
Yeah.
there you can get your presentation text and links
Okay,
for that.
okay, guys, you can check out all the links and the content that you were seeing on the session by Vivek in our AsDev website.
No, actually, I will put that in my 1 second. Uh, I'll upload my presentation decks in my GitHub, so that where you can find the necessary repos. But this recording session will be available in the YouTube channel, and it will be always available in Azure Developer Community as well.
yeah.
So you can take a look at these repos to have the previous presentations and everything. So that should be helpful for you.
Okay, thank you, Vivek. That's all we had on open source. So we have another speaker in our call, Vishwas, who will be taking over the Hacktoberfest, how we have to how we can use open source contributions in the month of October, and why Hacktoberfest is much more than what regular open source individual open source community, and where here why it is celebrated as a festival for developers. Over to you, Vishwas.
Yeah, thank you, Namrata. Thank you so much for adding me here. And I think Vivek Raja has an amazing set of repositories where, it's all about that. It's all about that when you see. So yeah, I'll be sharing my screen and I'll be showing you some of the best people who are the real reason behind this Oktoberfest, what we are talking today, and the things like that. It's called as Travis Oliphant, who is the creator of who is a creator of NumPy, who is also a creator of SciPy and Anaconda Inc. And there are amazing ways in which people have really contributed. Like something like, you know, Lex Fridman is one of my favorite guys to just watch in every single day and whatnot. Like these are the amazing people that I could ever find in the industry. Like I could follow them, I could just reach out to them, and they talk about NumPy, the Guido von Rossum's pep package. It's not about that. Like I'm just giving a quick intro because what is it all about? Pep standards. So there are five Pep standards. If you just go here, there is a standard in which you are supposed to write the code, and your JetBrains, PyCharm, Pep standard. No, when you just took a look at the something like this, it's all about that professional development that goes behind it. So I can show you a package called as TensorFlow, which everybody uses, and I can also show you a package called as PyTorch, GitHub. Because a lot of times when we confuse with like what is this all about, what is this PyPy package, it's all the same old CI/CD stuff which is happening. So if you see PyTorch, it's using Circle CI to do all its deployment. So there is a Docker-based version of the deployment. Uh, there is always an CI model which is always built for you. And if you see a typical structure of any of the projects that you're talking today, it's all about this that you care. Like something like, okay, there is something called as actions. I think actions is not here. I think so. Yeah, actions is here because there is a tab called as GitHub. Oh, sorry. Azure pipelines. Yeah, that's also there. And also there's a GitHub thing. So your .github/workflows gives you all an access to your build options that are always there. So there are amazing ways in which you don't have to do all the mundane job. You can automate it. Like you can actually go and see one of our speaker, you know, containers for rest of us. This is one of my channel. Oh yeah, this is he. His name is Amir Jan, and an amazing community enthusiast. He is in HackerRank or something. Yeah, he is in HackerRank. His repository is this. He has a repository called as Cube Live, and anybody can contribute it. So a simple step to contribute is to fork it, star it, and start working on it. Or else have a simple funda about it. You just have to just replace that .com with div. It goes to a VS Code extension. This is called as a Git pod. Gitpod has everything to do. Like since I had almost had opened it last time, so it has all the caches. It knows what editing that I did and whatnot. And also I tried editing something on the this side, and this is what it came out as. And it is saying me, hey, you have to commit it. Like it's a web based development tool which is already really available. So you can do anything. So a minimum of 4 PR is required, and everything is sorted for your goodies in the Hacktoberfest. So that's what it is all about. So, but there is beyond it. So there is some sort of CI/CD pipelines. As soon as you see the way in which the repository is being structured, you will be flabbergasted. Like, hey, a lot of automation is happening. The mundane jobs are going out, and I think Saumil Chintal is one of the best researchers that you can actually go to the Twitter and get him. He has some amazing papers on PyTorch itself, so you guys can go, and a lot of other things. So an Hacktoberfest is one of this is one of my websites, so don't worry. Hacktoberfest. When Oktoberfest started as a journey in order to celebrate that open source. Why? It's because of the people behind it. It's like some people like Francois Chaletti, the guy who invented Keras, because that was a Google Summer of Code project, like something like SQL Learn. It's also a Google Summer of Code project as well. So it was written in Python, but I forgot the guy who wrote this, who wrote Scalar. So yeah, so he's the one. So he started this as an Google of Summer of Code project. So it's one of the basic scenarios where it was just one click of an emotion. Like, okay, there is an SVM, we are supposed to hard code it and whatnot, but everything comes at its own price. So abstraction of it has its own way. So if you go here, there are 5k plus issues, and there is an all the ways that you can draw a lot of things. Like these are the real users who have a genuine way of getting to know what is required. And also sometimes, this is where it is. So that's where people are actually thinking about, hey, how can I contribute, how can I just get it. So even though there are 15,000 plus open, this is not a perfect repository. When you go for the release version, I'll show you how to do that also in here. So how to get the packages and everything. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing. So Oktoberfest started as that journey in order to celebrate it, but what happened was there were a lot of chaotic moments, like something like, somebody solves an issues but it's not completely solved, then how can you merge it? So there are a lot of things. So if you just go here, there are people who are communicating like, hey, this is what we changed, this is what we want to update it. And if you go there, you can really solve it. And contributing to Oktoberfest is just like your Git pod being created, and you going here and saying like, hey, you just go here. Oh, this is for the version control, so you can't do anything there. But yeah, it's something as good as you just change something here, you just save it, and you have a commit here, and you do it. And somebody doesn't see that, and somebody just puts it. That's also there, because a lot of things can go wrong. Because every time, this is what we always think about, like, hey, what can really go wrong? And best thing is to be always be cherishing with uh, all your things that you really want to contribute towards, and also say that, hey, this is not going to work for me until and unless I don't give a lot of things. So this is what a perfect documentation of readme looks like. It has everything. So that's where from Amir sir also I have written it, and he's also putting how many people are actually loving this, the way it's working, and also what others say. That's what it's all about. And very simple, you just have to go to any of the project. Like, let me just go to my reactor project. It was just there, so I'll show you how it is. It also has a lot of automation. Like, there is an publish to ACR. This is for Azure Container Registry. So password, everything as in secret has been added, and it directly goes and shifts onto my releases. So since I removed that account itself, so I don't have it. I removed my Azure subscription because it was a little hectic for me to pay everything. And there is always a test code which is happening, like something like, hey, you have a secret API code which is already there, and this is all automated. You need not have to do everything from scratch. Like, if you just see my actions, there is already one task which is running right now. I think new ACR. I don't think so. This will start in another 10 minutes or 20 minutes because it's already gone. But when you think of my GitHub repository, of course it has been published and there is a new version of it. So if I can go to Docker Hub, which was Narayana Ari slash, which was, that's the project that is there. Yeah, I still remember that. Of course, there is other things like 20 mage, this, that, whatnot. So you can go to my Docker Hub and you can look at what I have been doing. So I think updated 15 minutes ago. That's what I did. Like just what I did was 15 minutes before I just updated one thing. It's like I needed some tags. So which tag should I use? So there is always an SHA tag which is already being done. So it still remains the same. Like the package race still remains the same. The way it's behaving still remains the same. And you can have a snake integration. So snake, this can also be done. So that this is how you secure the way in which the repositories are being taken care. Like, Snake doesn't check onto your entire code base; it just checks onto your manifest files. Something like this. This is a Docker file. It just sees, okay, what should be updated on this point of time. So if you see the other versions which are had already had done, so it's like 20 days ago I saw that there is an this one. So unified view is something like, okay, we are doing this and that and whatnot. So run app get update. Once again, it doesn't make sense now. So that's what it is. So I think These were the two additions that was there. This was the two that was removed. But I don't know how that happened. Was That's how it is. So releases are best part of it. So it's something like you have a tag. You have something like 1.0.1, like something like I just do this and I have a title for this, just a demo. And you have something like, hey, this is the repo. And what you do is you can publish it. Oh, sorry, it didn't happen. So it's a tag here, duplicate tag name. That's fine. So that's all right. And that's always there. That's the version that you are always thinking about, and that's what it is always moving towards. And this is a duplicate tag. Edit them. Existing tag, perfect. I'm just going to edit it, and it's now sorted, and it comes out as two assets. Like it's something like it's a pre-release. Like now it's a beta version, so there is no other changes which has just been added. And what I can see is I can just download it. There are two ways in which you can see this as well. So this will be something like a tar file and a gz file. What you're seeing here, you have to just go for this zip and just extract it, or else there is a simple package. If you just see, all the repositories came in, but I didn't write any code. But there are packages like vivo tt from Microsoft, which has the same code repositories, which has some issues. What you can do is you can just go for the labels like active learning and whatnot. So everything is there. So everything can be contributed. So we can think like, okay, there is a CI/CD issue which is happening. No, why? Because there is already an automation which has already been done. I think there is an .github/issues template, and yeah, this is what they do. I think there is an Azure pipeline which is already written. So create releases. So whatever you saw, it's like YAML and your JSON is the language of DevOps. Can't help today. It's the same thing. You can add a lot of tags, and if you go to this releases, and you can see a different version for it. There is an exe version, there is an SMP version, there is a source code. If you just download it, you can do Docker install. That's for it. I think this is an npm package, so npm run works the fine. Npm install, npm run works the fine. And there are contributors. And somebody asked me what the stack can be, what are the stacks that can be learned. This is the information for the stack. And if you are so generous about creating a new one, like I can show you how to create one with the GitHub Actions as well. So you need not have to. As soon as you go there, as you click on this new repository, you can think of everything here. So there is already a Dockerized version of the GitHub packages which are still running. There is a Docker image. And this is how you incorporate a packaging into your entire repository. And that's what they want. So mentor others, organize others, donate directly to open source project. It's something like, okay, you have a project that it needs to be done. It can solve this project, and this is what they are doing. And preparing and share a project for collaboration, this is what happens at the end of the day. Every time it starts changing, so that's how it is. So you can see that it's already automated, and also moreover you can really see how the things are working. So you can see how, if you have an index.html, you need not have to worry. Wait, I can show you one of my projects here, which is on the Docker. No, it's a DevOps blog. I forgot that. Where is that? DevOps blog by Vishwasan. So yeah, if I can go here, if I have an admin privilege, I can go to something called as pages here. I can click on it. I have 37. Actually, one is still yet to be written. I think, yeah. This is one of my repository where I always love contributing towards the DevOps. Like I have a lot of articles on Scrum as well. So that is how you actually write an open source version of your documentation. You need not have to do anything. You just have to have an index.html and all these, and everything will be sorted. And there is always a branching which is always done, because every branch has its own way of working. Like something like, let's say I can change something like I go here in the reactor file. let me just say I change something like let's just edit it here, or else git pod is there, you can go there, or else fork it, do it e esp Espania or something like it should be working right now. So it doesn't matter because all of the things that I've written is an HTML script. So as soon as I changed there, the GitHub action started triggering. And this is what you call the magic of open source, like something like you just have it merged and everything is sorted. And if you are, of course, if I was the only guy was maintaining it, nobody is part of it, anybody can fork it and start working with it, and that's what it is all about. So every task gets done, it will be having a tick. If not, it will be having no tick, and this is what it is all about. So essentially what open source means is something as good as open source. Oh, sorry for that. What open source means is that you have a repository and you have a structure for it to be there, and you have a target, and this target is always focusing towards an audience. Shit, I think I just woke up, so that's why. And this target should never conflict with the audience for using it. Your code might be solving $1 million issues, but nobody cares until and unless everybody gets to use it. So it can be a private project, but once you open source it, it's public and everybody has an access to it and anybody can criticize it. So you should also be there. So that's where Oktoberfest also has their own way of saying like, okay, maintainers determine if the open source project participants by adding their Hacktoberfest topics. So they know that they have this issues first and whatnot. So that's how they start working towards building such kind of a culture, and that's how they start making sure that you know everything about what you're doing. So simple. Today you need not have to fork it as well. You can just go to the GitHub pod and you can start editing it. Everything will be there. It's very easy to use as well. So let me just do that. Something like from Ubuntu 20 or something. Let me just do this. And of course, there's already a branch created. I want to commit it, and I want to write something like, hey, which was edited some version, something like this. And I'm committing it. This is for the main. If you want, you can also do a lot of branching, create a new branch, and you can say testing branch, testing, something as good as this, and switch to branch will automatically happen. And you have an entire file base which is there for you to edit. And what you can do is you can just go here and start working on, okay, readme.md. I have not written anything. Okay, let me just say here I am writing something as good as 18. So I save it. 18 version has been added. And that branch will be created and the commit changes has been done, and it will automatically go on a push because this is a git pod where you're doing on an online repository, and this is a testing branch which has already been created. So if you can see that there is already this versioning which has been done, and somebody will say, hey, somebody deleted it, somebody added this and things like that. Should I merge it, should I not merge it? And I think there is an open source version of Snake. I can show you that as well. I think that repository only had that kind of an logging which I already required in that. I think there is one project which I had done it there already. Demo app Docker file. Oh yeah, I can show you that as well. So there is already a list of vulnerabilities which has already been done. So open a fix PR. If I do this, let me just show you what happens. So this is a demo app. which is actually taking the Dockerized version of everything. So it's need not have to worry about it. So I'll open a fixed PR version, like something like, hey, all of this has one thing, but there is an versioning which is required. So preparing for your PR and everything is sorted, and see how automatically everything is being done. So this is the feature of it, and there is already a branch which has been created, and oh, it's been committed 8 days before. Fine, that's fine. That's cool. So now there is a Snike branch which has been created, and let's see what is that contribution that has gone there. So yeah, that's what I was saying. So it can be automated. It's something like you have a version of everything, and you know, okay, where is this PR going wrong and things like that. So this is a private repository which I have right now. Like yeah, CodeQL version. Oh my god, like everything can be automated. This is just a simple version of your just snake integration for testing. I just did that. And if you can go to the GitHub actions, you can see all of it. Like since I removed all the credentials, nothing is working, or else everything starts working. So this is what your CI merges happen. So this is it. This is it for your entire open source contribution. You can really automate a lot of bug fixing through Snike and some open source platforms like this. And also you can really do that. So you can really fork the repository, add it on your side, and you can really go get the manifest files being tested, and you can really contribute using that as well. So Hacktoberfest is simple, but yet difficult until and unless you don't understand that process. So Snike is an amazing way of understanding what is this open source happening and things like that. So yeah, I think that's it from my side, folks. Thank you so much. I think that's the
Uh,
end of this
Thank you,
session.
Vishwas. Thank you for taking a wonderful session on giving a brief about Hacktoberfest for all of us. So, guys, if you have any questions, you can post it in the chat window. We'll try our best to answer those in the next 5 minutes before we wind up the session.
Yeah, 12 o'clock we have one more session, so you guys can join there, because most of the things are facilitating communication with the people there. So yeah, that's what we are planning towards. So
Guys,
yeah,
if
I
you have
think
any questions, you can post it on the chat window.
yeah,
Anything
if you
regarding open source or Hacktoberfest, any query.
I don't worry, like it's a simple stuff like what I gave about this Git pod and everything. So I think probably they would have got it. Yeah, that's it, folks. Thank you so much.
Okay, folks. Thank you for joining and have a lovely weekend.
Sure.